Max's ears perked up the moment they stepped into the Atlanta Police Department briefing room. The German shepherd's dark eyes swept the room with the precision of a trained operative, his tactical harness gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Sarah Collins felt the familiar tug of their shared instincts as her partner's posture shifted into high alert mode. "Collins, front and center." Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the morning chatter. Sarah straightened her uniform, the silver badge catching the light as she approached the podium where a collection of military personnel waited in crisp dress uniforms. "Ma'am." Sarah's response was automatic, professional. Max moved with her, his paws silent on the linoleum floor, positioning himself perfectly at her left side without command. "You and Max are being assigned to Fort Benning for a special detail." Rodriguez gestured to a tall army officer with colonel's insignia. "This is Colonel Bradley. He'll brief you on the specifics." Colonel Bradley stepped forward, his weathered face bearing the marks of decades in service. His pale blue eyes assessed Sarah with military precision before dropping to Max. "Officer Collins, your reputation precedes you, both of you." Sarah felt Max's subtle tension through their bond. Her partner's head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring as he processed scents and sounds invisible to human perception. Something about Bradley made Max uneasy. "General Morrison is receiving the Distinguished Service Cross next Tuesday," Bradley continued, his voice carrying the authority of command. "It's a ceremony 6 years in the making. The general deserves this recognition for his service in Afghanistan." "What's our role?" Sarah asked, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on Max's head. The contact grounded them both. "Security detail. We've received anonymous threats against the general's life." Bradley's expression darkened. 3 letters in the past month, each one more specific than the last." Rodriguez slid a manila folder across the table. Sarah opened it, revealing photocopied letters written in block capitals. Max's nose twitched as she examined the pages, his acute senses detecting something she couldn't. "Morrison doesn't deserve medals," the first letter read. "He deserves a coffin." The second was worse. "The ceremony will be his funeral." The third made Sarah's blood run cold. "Heroes die hard." "Any forensics?" Sarah asked, her detective instincts engaging. "Clean. No prints, generic paper, postmarked from different locations around Georgia." Bradley's jaw tightened. "Whoever's behind this knows what they're doing." Max shifted closer to Sarah, his warm presence a reminder of their countless successful operations together. They'd faced drug cartels, human traffickers, and domestic terrorists. But military conspiracies were uncharted territory. "General Morrison is a decorated officer," Bradley continued. "Served 3 tours in Afghanistan, saved countless lives. Some people can't accept that real heroes exist." Sarah studied the colonel's face, noting the slight tension around his eyes when he mentioned Afghanistan. Max's ear twitched, a subtle signal she'd learned to read over their 6 years together. "We'll need full access to the ceremony grounds," Sarah said. "Security protocols, guest lists, vendor information. Max will need to sweep the entire area." "Of course," Bradley nodded. "The general's safety is our top priority." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Collins, this is high profile. Military brass, politicians, media coverage. No mistakes." "Understood." Sarah's confidence was unwavering. She and Max had never failed to protect their charges. As the briefing concluded, Sarah gathered the files while Max remained alert, his dark eyes tracking every movement in the room. The shepherd's intuition had saved her life more times than she could count. His current unease was worth noting. Colonel Bradley approached as they prepared to leave. "Officer Collins, I should mention, General Morrison has been through some difficult times. The ceremony means everything to him." "We'll make sure he gets his moment," Sarah replied firmly. Max's low growl was barely audible, but Sarah felt it through their connection. Her partner's instincts were screaming warning signals about something none of them could yet see. As they walked toward the parking garage, Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Anonymous threats, military politics, and a ceremony 6 years in the making. Max's unease suggested layers of complexity they hadn't uncovered yet. "What do you think, boy?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Something's not adding up, is it?" Max's amber eyes met hers with the intelligence that had made him legendary within the K9 unit. His tail remained still, alert, ready for whatever waited at Fort Benning. The drive south would give them time to process the details. But Sarah knew one thing with certainty. Max's instincts had never steered them wrong. Whatever they were walking into, it was bigger than anonymous threats against a war hero. The partnership that had solved Atlanta's most complex cases was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The gates of Fort Benning loomed ahead like steel jaws as Sarah guided their patrol car through the checkpoint. Max sat rigid in the passenger seat, his hackles slightly raised as uniformed guards scrutinized their credentials with suspicious intensity. "First time on base?" The MP's tone carried barely concealed disdain as he handed back Sarah's ID. His name tag read, "Sergeant Pike." "Yes, sir." Sarah kept her voice neutral, professional. Max's low rumble vibrated through the car's interior. Pike's eyes narrowed at the sound. "Keep that dog under control, officer. This is a military installation, not a petting zoo." Sarah felt Max's muscles tense beneath his tactical vest. Her partner understood every word, every inflection of disrespect. Max is a decorated K9 officer with 6 years of active service. He's here to do a job, whatever. Pike waved them through with obvious reluctance. As they drove past rows of identical barracks and training facilities, Sarah noticed the sideways glances from soldiers. Word of their arrival had already spread. Max's head swiveled constantly, cataloging scents and sounds with mechanical precision. The ceremony venue stood at the base's heart, a pristine parade ground surrounded by viewing stands and a raised platform where General Morrison would receive his medal. American flags snapped in the Georgia breeze, their colors vibrant against the cloudless sky. Colonel Bradley waited near the platform, his uniform immaculate despite the morning heat. Beside him stood a younger officer with captain's bars and hostile eyes. "Officer Collins." Bradley's greeting was cordial but strained. "This is Captain Hayes, my aide. He'll coordinate your security sweep." Hayes stepped forward without extending his hand. "Colonel Bradley says you need full access." "I'm not sure what a civilian police officer can accomplish that military security can't handle." Max's ears flattened against his skull. The shepherd's reaction to Hayes was immediate and visceral, a deep distrust that Sarah felt through their bond. "We're here to complement your security, not replace it," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Max specializes in explosive detection and threat assessment. Our bomb squad already cleared the area twice," Hayes said dismissively. "Then a third sweep won't hurt?" Sarah's voice carried the authority of someone who'd never lost a protected target. "Max, search!" The command unleashed 6 years of training and instinct. Max moved across the parade ground like liquid shadow, his nose working methodically as he quartered the area. Sarah watched him with professional pride, every movement precise, every indication deliberate. Near the platform's base, Max paused. His posture shifted subtly, head cocking as he processed something invisible to human senses. Not an alert, but something that demanded investigation. "What's he doing?" Hayes demanded. "Working." Sarah approached her partner, reading the subtle signs in his body language. "What is it, boy?" Max circled a section of ground 3 times before sitting, his indication for something worth noting, though not immediately dangerous. Sarah knelt beside him, running her hands through the grass while Max watched intently. Her fingers found nothing unusual, but Max's instincts had never failed them. Whatever had caught his attention was significant. "Find anything?" Colonel Bradley approached, his tone genuinely curious rather than dismissive like his aide's. Max detected something here. Nothing dangerous but worth remembering. Sarah stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "He's rarely wrong about these things." Hayes scoffed. "A dog getting excited about a squirrel isn't intelligence." Max's head turned toward Hayes with predatory focus. The shepherd's dark eyes held intelligence that made the captain visibly uncomfortable. Max doesn't get excited about squirrels, Sarah said quietly. He gets excited about threats. The tension stretched between them until Bradley intervened. Let's continue the sweep. The ceremony is in 3 days. They moved through the viewing stands methodically. Max examined every seat, every support beam, every potential hiding spot with obsessive thoroughness. His behavior remained professional but alert, occasionally glancing back toward the spot that had initially caught his attention. "Impressive animal," Bradley commented as they watched Max work. "How long have you two been partnered?" 6 years. Sarah's pride was evident. "He's saved my life more times than I can count." "And you trust his judgment completely?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "With my life." Something in Bradley's expression flickered, respect perhaps, or recognition of a bond he understood. That kind of partnership is rare, in any service. Hayes rejoined them after checking the sound system. Everything's clean, no surprises. But Max's continuing alertness suggested otherwise. The shepherd maintained his professional demeanor while remaining subtly on edge, like a coiled spring waiting for the right moment to release. As they completed their initial sweep, Sarah noticed the base's atmosphere. Soldiers moved with purpose, but conversations stopped when she and Max approached. The isolation was deliberate, systematic. "We'll need to return tomorrow for another sweep," Sarah informed Bradley. "Of course, Captain Hayes will coordinate with you." Hayes nodded reluctantly. "Just remember, this is our house, our rules." Walking back to their car, Sarah felt the weight of hostile stares from every direction. Max pressed closer to her side, his protective instincts fully engaged. "We're not welcome here, are we?" she murmured to her partner. Max's amber eyes met hers with perfect understanding. They were outsiders in a closed world, civilian cops invading military territory. But they had a job to do, and neither hostile officers nor institutional resistance would stop them. The drive off base was quiet, both partners processing the day's observations. Max's initial reaction to the ceremony ground remained unexplained, but Sarah trusted his instincts completely. Whatever secrets Fort Benning harbored, Max had detected the first signs. The question was whether they'd uncover the truth before General Morrison's ceremony became something far more sinister than a simple medal presentation. The real investigation was just beginning. Sarah's laptop screen glowed in the dim light of their Fort Benning quarters as she reviewed security protocols for the 3rd time. Max lay beside her narrow bunk, his breathing steady, but his ears twitching at every sound beyond their door. Even in sleep, her partner remained vigilant. The protocols were textbook perfect, too perfect. Every contingency addressed, every angle covered, every potential threat neutralized on paper. But Max's reaction yesterday suggested something the paperwork missed. A soft knock interrupted her analysis. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her sidearm as Max rose silently, positioning himself between her and the door. "Officer Collins, it's Colonel Bradley." Sarah checked her watch. 2300 hours. Late for a social call. "Come in, sir." Bradley entered alone, his uniform replaced by civilian clothes that somehow made him look older, more vulnerable. Max's posture remained tense but controlled. "Can't sleep either?" Bradley asked, noting the laptop and scattered files. "Just reviewing tomorrow's schedule." Sarah gestured to a folding chair. "Something I can help you with, Colonel?" Bradley sat heavily, his weathered hands clasping and unclasping. "Tell me about your partner's behavior yesterday, when he detected something near the platform." Sarah studied the Colonel's face. Max indicated something worth investigating. Not immediate danger, but anomalous. Anomalous how? Scent traces, residue, disturbed earth, could be anything. Max processes information we can't detect. Sarah's voice carried professional certainty. "Why?" Bradley was quiet for a long moment. Max settled onto his haunches, dark eyes fixed on the Colonel with unwavering attention. "General Morrison hasn't always been popular," Bradley said finally. "His methods in Afghanistan were controversial." "What kind of controversial?" "The kind that saves lives but creates enemies." Bradley's jaw tightened. "Morrison made hard choices. Choices that kept his soldiers alive but ruffled feathers back home. Sarah sensed deeper currents beneath Bradley's words. Are you saying the threats might be legitimate grievances? I'm saying Morrison has been fighting this battle for 6 years. This ceremony is his vindication. Bradley met her eyes. Some people don't want him vindicated. Max's head tilted slightly, processing vocal stress patterns and body language with canine precision. His subtle shift closer to Sarah indicated Bradley's elevated anxiety levels. Who specifically doesn't want him vindicated? Sarah pressed. Bradley stood abruptly. Just keep your partner alert tomorrow. If he senses something, don't ignore it. After Bradley left, Sarah found sleep impossible. She pulled on her boots and jacket, clipping Max's leash with practiced efficiency. Come on, boy, let's take a walk. The base at midnight was eerily quiet. Security lights cast harsh shadows between buildings, while distant sounds of night training exercises echoed across the grounds. Max moved beside her with predatory grace, every sense engaged. They approached the ceremony area from a different angle, avoiding the main pathways. Max immediately led her toward the spot that had caught his attention earlier, his nose working methodically. In the moonlight, Sarah noticed what daylight had obscured. Subtle tire tracks in the grass, too fresh to be from regular maintenance. Max's investigation became more focused, his breathing changing to the rapid pattern that indicated significant scent detection. "What do you smell, Max?" she whispered. The shepherd's response was immediate, a focused search pattern that led him in expanding circles around the platform. His behavior indicated multiple scent trails, overlapping and complex. Sarah's flashlight revealed additional details: disturbed earth that suggested recent digging, grass that had been replaced but not yet fully rooted, and most concerning, small metal fragments partially buried in the soil. Max's indication was unmistakable now. He sat directly over the largest fragment, his dark eyes meeting Sarah's with perfect communication. Explosive residue. Sarah photographed everything with her phone, careful not to disturb the evidence. The fragments were tiny but significant, traces of materials that had no business near a medal ceremony. "Good boy," she murmured, scratching Max's ears. "Very good boy." They returned to quarters in contemplative silence. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities while Max remained alert, processing the night's discoveries. The security protocols weren't just inadequate, they were deliberately designed to miss what Max had found. Back in their room, Sarah studied the photographs on her laptop screen. The metal fragments were too small and scattered to be recent explosive placement, but they indicated someone had tested or prepared devices in that exact location. Max settled beside her chair, his warm presence grounding her analysis. His instincts had led them to evidence that trained military bomb technicians had missed or ignored. The implications were staggering. Either Fort Benning security was criminally incompetent, or someone with access and authority had deliberately overlooked critical evidence. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll find more than you bargained for." Max's head lifted at her sharp intake of breath. The shepherd's eyes reflected the laptop's glow as he sensed her elevated stress. "Someone's watching us, boy." Sarah deleted the message and powered down her phone. "But they don't know what they're dealing with." She ran her fingers through Max's thick coat, drawing comfort from their unbreakable bond. 6 years of partnership had taught them to trust each other completely, especially when official channels failed. Tomorrow's rehearsal would reveal more. Max's discoveries tonight had confirmed what his instincts had suggested. The ceremony grounds were compromised, and someone with inside knowledge was working to keep that information buried. Sarah checked her service weapon and Max's tactical vest one final time. Whatever conspiracy they'd stumbled into, it was bigger than anonymous threats against a decorated general. The real enemy wasn't some disgruntled veteran sending threatening letters. It was someone close enough to the ceremony to manipulate security protocols and cover evidence. Max's low growl suggested he sensed her conclusions. The Shepherd's protective instincts were fully engaged now, recognizing that their investigation had moved beyond routine security into something far more dangerous. The partnership that had never failed Atlanta's citizens was about to face its greatest test in hostile territory, surrounded by enemies wearing friendly uniforms. The morning rehearsal proceeded with military precision as generals and dignitaries took their positions on the parade ground. Sarah positioned herself near the platform's edge, while Max conducted his final security sweep, his movements methodical and professional, despite the growing crowd of observers. General Morrison stood at attention center stage, a tall man with silver hair and bearing that commanded respect even without his decorated uniform. His weathered face carried the weight of 6 years of controversy, but his posture remained proud, unbowed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Hayes announced through the PA system, "we'll now rehearse the medal presentation sequence." Max completed his circuit of the viewing stands and returned to Sarah's side, his dark eyes scanning the assembled crowd. Everything appeared normal until it didn't. The Shepherd's head snapped toward the podium with sudden intensity. His nostrils flared as he processed something that sent alarm signals racing through his nervous system. Sarah felt the change immediately through their bond. "Max," she whispered. The dog's response was electric. He bounded toward the podium with explosive energy, his powerful frame moving faster than Sarah had ever seen. His deep bark shattered the ceremonial quiet as he launched himself onto the platform. "Get that dog under control!" Hayes shouted as Max planted himself directly between General Morrison and the podium microphone. Sarah sprinted after her partner, but Max's behavior was beyond commands now. The Shepherd's entire body vibrated with urgent warning as he pawed at the podium's base, his vocalizations becoming increasingly frantic. "Max, down!" Sarah commanded, but her partner ignored her completely. General Morrison stepped back instinctively as Max's investigation became more aggressive. The Shepherd's nose worked frantically around the podium's base before he suddenly sat in perfect alert position, his trained indication for explosive materials. The parade ground fell silent except for Max's continued whimpering, a sound Sarah had heard only once before, during a warehouse raid that had nearly killed them both. "Everyone back!" Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the confusion. "Clear the platform now! Officer Collins, control your animal!" Colonel Bradley's command was sharp, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes as he watched Max's behavior. Sarah ignored him, trusting 6 years of partnership over military protocol. "Max only acts like this for active explosives. Everyone needs to evacuate immediately." "There are no explosives," Hayes protested. "Our bomb squad cleared." Max's explosive bark cut him off. The Shepherd's alert had escalated to desperate urgency, his entire body language screaming danger that only Sarah could read. "Listen to me." Sarah's voice carried absolute authority. "My partner has found over 40 explosive devices in 6 years. He's never been wrong, not once." General Morrison was the first to move. "Clear the area," he ordered with battlefield calm. "Now!" The platform emptied rapidly as military personnel responded to command structure. Sarah approached Max carefully, reading his body language with expert precision. "Show me, boy." "Where exactly?" Max's nose led her to a specific spot at the podium's base. Sarah knelt beside him, her hands moving carefully over the surface while Max watched intently. Her fingers found what her eyes couldn't, a slight irregularity in the podium's construction. "Bomb squad, now!" she called out. The next 30 minutes passed in controlled chaos as Fort Benning's explosive ordnance disposal team arrived with their equipment. Sarah and Max were moved to a safe distance, but the Shepherd's agitation continued until the EOD robot began its examination. "Preliminary scan shows anomalous readings," the bomb tech reported through his radio. "Possible device embedded in the podium structure." Colonel Bradley's face went pale. Captain Hayes looked sick. The robot's camera revealed what Max's nose had detected, a sophisticated explosive device built into the podium's base, virtually invisible to conventional inspection, but impossible to hide from canine senses. "Device is active," the EOD technician confirmed. "Timer mechanism, approximately 48 hours remaining, would have detonated during tomorrow's ceremony." Sarah felt her knees weaken. Max had just saved dozens of lives, including General Morrison's. The bomb was disarmed with painstaking care, while Max remained alert but calmer, satisfied that the immediate threat was neutralized. Sarah scratched behind his ears with shaking hands. How did he know? General Morrison approached them after the all-clear was given. How could he detect something our equipment missed? "Max processes chemical signatures we can't imagine," Sarah explained. "Explosive compounds have distinctive scent profiles that linger for days." Morrison knelt beside Max, extending his hand for the shepherd to sniff. "You saved my life, soldier." Max's tail wagged once, a rare display of emotion from the professional working dog. Colonel Bradley joined them, his expression troubled. This device was sophisticated. Military-grade components, professional installation. Whoever placed this had extensive knowledge of our security protocols. "Inside job?" Sarah asked. "Has to be. The podium was assembled yesterday under strict supervision. Only authorized personnel had access." Captain Hayes appeared beside Bradley, his face ashen. "Sir, I supervised that assembly personally. Everyone was cleared, vetted, authorized." Sarah studied Hayes's reaction carefully. His shock appeared genuine, but her detective instincts noted his defensive posture. "We'll need a complete investigation," Morrison said. "Every person with access, every security protocol, every possible breach point." Max pressed against Sarah's leg, seeking comfort after the stress of the alert. She could feel his exhaustion. The intense focus required for explosive detection took enormous mental energy. "The ceremony is postponed indefinitely," Bradley announced, "until we can guarantee absolute security." As the crowd dispersed, Sarah remained with Max near the platform. The shepherd's heroic intervention had prevented a tragedy, but it had also exposed a conspiracy that reached deep into Fort Benning's command structure. "Someone really wanted General Morrison dead," she murmured to Max, "and they almost succeeded." Max's amber eyes met hers with shared understanding. Their investigation had just taken a deadly turn. The anonymous threats had been a distraction. The real danger came from someone with unlimited access and intimate knowledge of military operations. The partnership that had solved countless cases in Atlanta had just prevented a military assassination. But Sarah knew their work was far from over. Someone at Fort Benning was a traitor, and Max's extraordinary senses had just painted a target on both their backs. General Morrison's private office felt like a museum of military history, its walls lined with commendations, photographs, and maps of distant battlefields. Sarah sat across from him, while Max lay at her feet, still recovering from the morning's intense alert. The shepherd's breathing had finally returned to normal, but his eyes remained watchful. "Your partner saved my life today," Morrison said, pouring coffee with steady hands that had once held rifles in combat zones. "I owe you both an explanation." Sarah accepted the cup gratefully. "Colonel Bradley mentioned Afghanistan was controversial for you." Morrison's weathered face darkened. "Controversial is a polite word for what happened there." He moved to a wall map, dotted with red pins. 3 tours, 36 months of hell. Max's ears perked at the emotion in Morrison's voice. The shepherd had an uncanny ability to sense human distress, and Morrison carried decades of it. "The press called me a war criminal," Morrison continued, his finger tracing locations on the map. "Said I executed civilians, destroyed villages, ignored rules of engagement." His voice carried bitter resignation. "They weren't entirely wrong." Sarah set down her coffee. "What actually happened?" Morrison pulled a photograph from his desk drawer. A group of soldiers in desert camouflage, young faces hardened by war. My unit was tasked with securing supply routes through Kandahar province. Taliban had infiltrated local villages, using civilians as human shields. He pointed to a soldier in the photo center, younger Morrison, flanked by men who looked barely old enough to vote. We lost 3 soldiers the first week. Roadside bombs, sniper attacks, suicide bombers disguised as farmers. Max shifted closer to Sarah, sensing the emotional weight of Morrison's memories. The shepherd's presence grounded her as the general continued his painful recounting. The rules of engagement were clear. Minimize civilian casualties, win hearts and minds, build trust with local populations. Morrison's laugh was hollow. Beautiful theory, deadly practice. Sarah leaned forward. What changed? August 15th, 2018. Morrison's voice went flat. Military. Taliban used a wedding celebration as cover for an ambush. 22 of my soldiers wounded, 6 killed. The bride was 16 years old, strapped with explosives. The silence stretched between them. Max's breathing was the only sound as Morrison wrestled with memories that still haunted him. I made a decision that night. No more civilian casualties on my watch. Theirs or ours. Morrison returned to his desk, pulling out more photographs. We started hitting Taliban strongholds preemptively. Hard, fast, effective. Sarah studied the images, destroyed buildings, smoking ruins, the aftermath of military operations conducted without political oversight. The villages you were accused of destroying. Every structure we hit housed Taliban fighters or weapons caches. Every target was verified intelligence. Morrison's jaw tightened. But verification doesn't matter when CNN shows pictures of rubble where homes used to stand. Max rose and approached Morrison, his intuitive understanding of human pain drawing him closer. The general's hand moved unconsciously to scratch behind the shepherd's ears. Smart dog, Morrison murmured. Knows when someone's bleeding inside. Sarah felt pride in her partner's empathy. Max reads people better than most humans do. My unit's casualty rate dropped to 0 after we changed tactics, Morrison continued. 0. For 18 months, every soldier under my command came home alive. His eyes met Sarah's. Tell me that wasn't worth some bad publicity. But the investigation found wrongdoing, Sarah prompted gently. Morrison's expression hardened. The investigation found a scapegoat. Someone to blame for policies that came from much higher up the chain of command. He pulled out a thick file marked classified. Everything I did was authorized. Ordered, actually. Sarah's detective instincts engaged. Ordered by whom? My commanding officer, my mentor, the man who recommended me for this medal. Morrison's voice carried bitter irony. Colonel Marcus Bradley. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Max sensed her shock, rising to press against her leg with supportive weight. Bradley was your commanding officer in Afghanistan for all 3 tours. Every controversial decision, every aggressive tactic, every questionable operation. Bradley's orders. Morrison opened the classified file, revealing documents with Bradley's signature. When the investigation started, suddenly I was acting alone, exceeding authority, making rogue decisions. Sarah's mind raced through implications. Bradley had positioned himself as Morrison's supporter while secretly orchestrating his downfall. Why didn't you expose him? With what proof? Military politics is about plausible deniability. Bradley covered his tracks perfectly. Morrison's finger traced one document, except for one thing he couldn't control, which was, I kept copies of everything, every order, every authorization, every communication. Morrison's smile was grim. Insurance, you might say. Max's sudden alertness drew Sarah's attention. The shepherd's head tilted toward the office door, his acute hearing detecting something beyond human perception. Someone's coming, Sarah said quietly. Morrison quickly returned the documents to their file as footsteps approached. Colonel Bradley's voice carried through the thin walls, discussing security protocols with Captain Hayes. They can't know about these documents, Morrison whispered urgently. If Bradley realizes I've kept evidence of his orders. The implication hung between them as Max's posture shifted into protective mode. The shepherd positioned himself between Sarah and the door, reading tension levels that suggested immediate danger. Sarah's phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "Stop digging into the past or join Morrison in his grave." Max's low growl indicated he sensed her elevated stress. The shepherd's protective instincts were fully engaged as the pieces of a 6-year conspiracy began falling into place. Morrison wasn't just a controversial war hero. He was a liability to someone who had built a career on Morrison's sacrificed reputation. Someone who had orchestrated today's failed assassination attempt to permanently silence the only witness to his war crimes. The bomb in the podium hadn't been about justice for alleged war crimes. It had been about covering up the real ones, committed by the man now walking toward Morrison's office door. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her service weapon as Max prepared for whatever confrontation awaited them. Their investigation had just uncovered the motive for murder, but they were surrounded by enemies wearing friendly uniforms. The ghosts of Afghanistan were about to become very real threats in present-day Georgia. The knock on Morrison's door came exactly as predicted. Sarah quickly pocketed her phone while Max moved into position beside her chair, his dark eyes fixed on the entrance with predatory focus. "Come in," Morrison called, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from his posture. Colonel Bradley entered with Captain Hayes trailing behind, both men's expressions carefully neutral. Max's hackles rose slightly as Bradley's scent reached his sensitive nose. Stress hormones and something else the shepherd couldn't identify but instinctively distrusted. "General, I wanted to personally apologize for the security breach," Bradley said, his tone appropriately contrite. "A failure of this magnitude is unacceptable." Sarah studied Bradley's micro-expressions while Max processed his vocal stress patterns. Both partners detected deception beneath the colonel's professional facade. "Your K9 unit prevented a tragedy," Bradley continued, nodding towards Sarah. "Exceptional work under pressure." "Max deserves the credit," Sarah replied carefully. "His training saved lives today." Hayes stepped forward. "We've initiated a full investigation into how the device was placed. Every person with access is being interviewed." Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Any initial suspects?" "Too early to speculate," Bradley answered quickly, "but we'll find whoever did this." Max's subtle shift told Sarah that Bradley's stress levels had spiked. The shepherd's ability to detect lies through physiological changes was uncanny. After the officers left, Morrison waited several minutes before speaking. "Bradley knows I have those documents. He was fishing for information." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Where are they kept? Building 47, archived records, buried in thousands of similar files from the Afghanistan deployment. Morrison's expression was grim. "But if someone knew exactly what to look for..." "We need to secure those documents before they disappear," Sarah said. Max rose as she stood, his movement fluid and purposeful. The shepherd sensed their mission's urgency without understanding its specifics. The walk to Building 47 took them through Fort Benning's administrative sector, past identical concrete structures housing decades of military bureaucracy. Max's nose worked constantly, cataloguing scents and sounds that painted a complex picture of base activities. The archives building was largely deserted at this hour, staffed by a single clerk who barely looked up as Sarah showed her credentials. Max's paws were silent on the polished floors as they navigated corridors lined with file storage. "Afghanistan Deployment Records 2017-2019. The clerk directed them to a massive storage room filled with filing cabinets. Sarah began searching while Max conducted his own investigation, nose leading him systematically through the room. The shepherd's behavior indicated multiple recent human scents. More people had been here than normal archive traffic would suggest. Morrison, James A. In Colonel, Sarah found the section and began pulling files. The documents were extensive: operational reports, casualty lists, intelligence briefings spanning 3 years of deployment. Max's sudden alert drew her attention to a filing cabinet across the room. The shepherd sat in perfect indication posture, his signal for something significant discovered. Sarah approached to find the cabinet slightly ajar, recent scratches around the lock mechanism suggesting forced entry. Inside, gaps in the file sequence indicated missing documents. "Someone's been here first," she murmured to Max. But Morrison had been thorough. Sarah found what they needed in a misfiled section: photocopies of orders bearing Bradley's signature, authorizing the exact operations that had later destroyed Morrison's reputation. The documents painted a damning picture. Bradley had systematically ordered aggressive tactics while maintaining plausible deniability through carefully worded communications. When political pressure mounted, he'd thrown Morrison to the wolves. Max's continued agitation suggested they weren't alone. The shepherd's ears tracked sounds beyond human hearing, footsteps in distant corridors, voices too far away to understand, but close enough to concern him. Sarah photographed every relevant document with her phone, working quickly, while Max maintained watch. The evidence was overwhelming. Bradley had committed the war crimes that Morrison was accused of, then orchestrated a cover-up that destroyed an innocent man's career. "Got what we need, boy," she whispered to Max. The shepherd's response was immediate movement toward the exit, his protective instincts demanding they leave before discovery. His urgent pace suggested imminent danger. They almost made it. Captain Hayes appeared in the corridor ahead, flanked by 2 military police officers. His expression was no longer neutral. It carried the cold calculation of someone whose cover had been blown. "Officer Collins, you're out of bounds," Hayes said, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. "This area is restricted to authorized personnel." Sarah's detective instincts screamed warning. "I have written authorization from General Morrison." "Morrison's authorization doesn't extend to classified archives." Hayes stepped closer, his MPs moving to flank positions. "I'll need you to surrender any materials you've removed." Max's growl was low and menacing, his professional demeanor shifting into protection mode. The shepherd positioned himself between Sarah and the MPs, reading threat levels in their body language. "The files are part of an ongoing investigation," Sarah said firmly. "What investigation? Into what?" Hayes's questions came too quickly, too specifically. He knew exactly what she'd found. Sarah's phone contained evidence that could destroy Bradley's career and expose decades of covered-up war crimes. The same phone Hayes was now demanding she surrender. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Sarah tried diplomacy while calculating distances and escape routes. Max's positioning told her he'd reached the same conclusions. The shepherd's muscles coiled with barely restrained energy as he prepared for conflict. Hayes's radio crackled with Bradley's voice. "Status report on the archive situation." "Situation contained, sir," Hayes responded without breaking eye contact with Sarah. "Package secured." The code words sealed their fate. Sarah was the package, and securing her meant silencing the evidence she'd discovered. Max's explosive bark shattered the tense silence as he launched himself at the nearest MP. The shepherd's training took over. Disable threats, protect his partner, create escape opportunities. Sarah drew her weapon as chaos erupted in the narrow corridor. Max's attack created exactly the distraction they needed, but she knew they had seconds before reinforcements arrived. The partnership that had survived Atlanta's most dangerous criminals was about to face its ultimate test against corrupt military officers who had killed to protect their secrets. The classified files in Sarah's phone contained enough evidence to destroy Bradley's conspiracy, but only if they survived long enough to use it. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she and Max sprinted through Fort Benning's maze of administrative buildings. Behind them, radio chatter crackled with search coordinates and containment protocols. They'd escaped Hayes's ambush, but barely. Max led them through shortcuts only his keen senses could navigate, his nose tracking safe passages while avoiding patrol routes. The shepherd's tactical training had kicked in the moment violence erupted, and now he moved with military precision through hostile territory. "Safe house," Sarah panted, pointing toward a maintenance building she'd noted during their initial reconnaissance. Max bounded ahead, checking for threats, while she picked the lock with tools from her tactical kit. Inside, surrounded by industrial equipment and shadows, Sarah finally caught her breath. Max positioned himself at the door, his acute hearing monitoring for pursuit while she reviewed the photographed documents on her phone. The evidence was damning beyond imagination. Bradley hadn't just ordered questionable tactics, he'd systematically executed civilians, trafficked captured weapons, and falsified casualty reports. Morrison had been his unwitting front man, carrying out orders without understanding their true nature. "Jesus, Max," she whispered, scrolling through document after document. Morrison wasn't covering up war crimes, he was being framed for them. Max's ears twitched at her distress, but his attention remained focused on security. The shepherd understood they were in mortal danger, even if he couldn't comprehend the politics behind it. Sarah's phone rang, General Morrison's number. She hesitated before answering, unsure who else might be listening. "Morrison." "Sarah, thank God. Hayes reported you've gone rogue, stolen classified materials. Where are you?" Sarah's detective instinct screamed caution. "Somewhere safe. General, I found the documents. Bradley's signatures, operational orders, evidence of everything." Silence stretched across the connection. When Morrison spoke again, his voice carried exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. "You don't understand the complexity of what you've uncovered," he said finally. "Bradley wasn't just my commanding officer. He saved my life in Afghanistan multiple times." Sarah's blood chilled. "What do you mean?" "July 2018, Taliban mortar attack on our forward operating base. Bradley pulled me from my burning command post, carried me to safety with enemy rounds landing all around us." Morrison's voice cracked with emotion. "I owe him my life." Max's low whine indicated he sensed Sarah's emotional turmoil through their bond. The shepherd pressed against her leg, offering comfort as the implications became clear. "December 2018, Morrison continued. "Sniper attack during a routine patrol. Bradley spotted the muzzle flash, tackled me behind cover, killed the shooter with return fire." Another pause. "He saved my life so many times I lost count." Sarah felt sick. He was protecting his asset, making sure you survived to take the blame later. "That's what you don't understand about military brotherhood." Morrison's voice carried desperate loyalty. "Bradley isn't capable of what you're suggesting. The man who saved my life dozens of times couldn't orchestrate my destruction." But Sarah's training in human psychology revealed the truth Morrison couldn't accept. Bradley hadn't saved Morrison out of loyalty. He'd protected his perfect patsy, the idealistic officer who would follow orders without question and absorb responsibility when things went wrong. "General, where is Bradley right now?" "Coordinating the search for you. He's personally leading efforts to bring you in safely." Max's sudden alertness cut through their conversation. The shepherd's head snapped toward the maintenance building's rear entrance, his body language screaming immediate danger. Sarah killed the call and drew her weapon as footsteps approached from multiple directions. Through dirty windows, she glimpsed tactical lights sweeping the area with systematic precision. "Building 23, maintenance structure," a voice called through radio static. "Probable location confirmed." They'd been triangulated through the phone call. Morrison's loyalty to his mentor had just delivered Sarah and Max into Bradley's hands. Max's tactical training took over as the building was surrounded. The shepherd identified multiple entry points, calculating angles and distances with predatory intelligence. His low growl indicated at least 6 hostiles converging on their position. "Officer Collins," Bradley's amplified voice echoed from outside. "You're surrounded. Exit with your hands visible and your weapon holstered. No one needs to get hurt." Sarah's laugh was bitter. No one except the 2 witnesses to his war crimes and conspiracy. "What's the play, boy?" she whispered to Max. The shepherd's amber eyes met hers with perfect understanding. They'd faced impossible odds before, but never against military forces with unlimited resources and home field advantage. Through the windows, Sarah counted muzzle flashes and tactical positions. Bradley had deployed an entire squad to capture or eliminate them. The same tactical precision he'd used in Afghanistan was now turned against the people who could expose his crimes. Max's positioning indicated their best escape route, through the building's underground utility tunnels. The shepherd's nose had detected airflow patterns that suggested an alternate exit. "You have 30 seconds, Collins." Bradley's voice carried cold authority. "Surrender the stolen materials and walk away. This doesn't have to end badly." But Sarah knew it would end badly regardless. Bradley couldn't allow witnesses to survive, especially ones with evidence of his decades-long conspiracy. Max's subtle movement toward the utility access hatch was their only hope. The shepherd had found their lifeline through instinct and training that surpassed human tactical planning. "Time's up," Bradley announced. Smoke grenades crashed through windows as tactical teams prepared to storm the building. Max was already moving, his powerful frame disappearing into the utility tunnel as Sarah followed. The partnership that had trusted each other through countless dangers was about to test that trust against the most lethal enemy they'd ever faced. A war criminal with unlimited resources and the desperation of someone whose entire career was built on murder and deception. In the tunnels beneath Fort Benning, hunted by the very people they'd come to protect, Sarah and Max had only each other and the truth that could destroy a conspiracy 6 years in the making. The utility tunnels beneath Fort Benning reeked of decades-old machinery and stagnant water. Sarah followed Max through the cramped passages as their flashlight beams cut through absolute darkness. Above them, tactical boots thundered across the maintenance building floor, searching for prey that had already vanished. Max navigated the underground maze with supernatural precision, his nose leading them through intersections and dead ends toward an exit only he could detect. The shepherd's breathing remained controlled despite their desperate flight, his training allowing him to function under extreme stress. "Good boy," Sarah whispered as they paused at a junction. "Keep us moving." Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "Tunnel access point Delta 7. Emergency extraction. Trust no one in uniform." Sarah's detective instincts screamed caution, but their options were limited. Max's continued calm suggested the message wasn't a trap, at least not an immediate one. Delta 7 led them to an abandoned communication bunker from Fort Benning's Cold War era. Inside, sophisticated surveillance equipment hummed quietly, while monitors displayed real-time feeds from across the base. "Officer Collins," the voice came from shadows beyond the equipment arrays. "Please don't reach for your weapon." A figure emerged. Civilian clothes, middle-aged, with the bearing of someone accustomed to dangerous secrets. Max's posture remained alert but not aggressive, indicating no immediate threat. "Who are you?" Sarah kept her hand near her service weapon, despite his request. "Defense Intelligence Agency. Agent Martinez." He showed credentials that looked authentic. "I've been investigating Colonel Bradley for 18 months. Sarah's mind raced through implications. "You're federal. This conspiracy goes far beyond Fort Benning." Martinez activated one of his monitors, displaying financial records and communication intercepts. "Bradley's been running weapons through Afghanistan since 2017, captured Taliban armaments sold to private contractors, proceeds funneled through offshore accounts." Max moved closer to the screens, his intelligent eyes tracking the displayed information as if understanding its significance. "Morrison was the perfect cover," Martinez continued. "An idealistic officer who followed orders without questioning their source or purpose. Bradley used him to legitimize operations that were actually criminal enterprises." The monitor showed intercepted communications between Bradley and arms dealers, detailed financial transactions, and shipping manifests that painted a picture of systematic theft and trafficking spanning years. The war crimes allegations against Morrison were manufactured to discredit the one witness who could expose Bradley's operation, Martinez explained. Every controversial decision, every aggressive tactic, every questionable operation, Bradley's orders designed to generate negative publicity for Morrison while protecting the real criminal. Sarah studied the evidence with growing horror. How many people died to protect this secret? 17 that we know of. Soldiers who asked too many questions, civilians who witnessed too much, investigators who got too close. Martinez's expression was grim. Bradley's network includes officers at multiple bases, politicians in Washington, contractors with international connections. Max's sudden alertness drew their attention to the surveillance monitors. Tactical teams were approaching the bunker's location with systematic precision. "They've found us," Martinez said, rapidly destroying hard drives and equipment. "Bradley's got tracking technology we can't counter." Sarah's phone rang. Morrison again. This time, she didn't answer, finally understanding that the general's loyalty to his mentor made him an unwitting asset for the enemy. "There's something else," Martinez said as he worked. "The bomb in the podium wasn't meant to kill Morrison. It was meant to wound him, create sympathy, and eliminate the ceremony where Bradley planned to publicly support his protégé's vindication." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Bradley had orchestrated the entire sequence. Anonymous threats to justify security measures, a bomb designed to injure rather than kill, and a public ceremony where he would demonstrate unwavering loyalty to Morrison while privately ensuring the general never lived to expose the truth. "Hayes?" Sarah asked. "Bradley's inside man, placed in Morrison's unit specifically to monitor and manipulate the situation." Martinez finished his destruction protocols as tactical lights appeared outside the bunker. "Bradley's been planning Morrison's death for 6 years, waiting for the perfect moment when it would appear to be external terrorism rather than internal assassination." Max's low growl indicated multiple hostiles closing on their position. The shepherd positioned himself between Sarah and the bunker's entrance, reading threat levels through sound and scent that humans couldn't detect. "Emergency exit," Martinez pointed to a concealed hatch, "leads to the base's perimeter. After that, you're on your own." "What about your investigation?" "Dead with me if we don't move now." Martinez handed Sarah an encrypted drive. "Everything's on there. Get it to someone who can act on it." Explosives breached the bunker's main entrance as they dove through the emergency hatch. Max led them through another tunnel system, this one newer and better maintained, designed for Cold War emergencies that had never materialized. Behind them, gunfire erupted as Martinez held off their pursuers with whatever weapons he'd cached in the bunker. His sacrifice bought them precious minutes to reach the tunnel's exit point near the base perimeter. Sarah emerged into Georgia pine forest as dawn approached, Max beside her and the encrypted evidence of Bradley's crimes in her pocket. The shepherd immediately began checking for pursuit, his nose working to detect followers while his ears monitored for tactical movements. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Morrison and 3 text messages from Bradley himself. "Surrender now, and Morrison lives. Continue running, and watch him die." The final piece of Bradley's plan was revealed. Morrison wasn't just a patsy, he was leverage. Bradley would use the general's life to force Sarah's surrender, then eliminate both witnesses to his decades of crime. Max's amber eyes met hers with perfect understanding. They were alone against a conspiracy that reached from Afghanistan to Washington, hunted by military forces and corrupt officials who had killed repeatedly to protect their secrets. But they had the evidence. Everything Martinez had gathered, everything Sarah had photographed, every piece of proof needed to expose Bradley's network and save Morrison's life. The partnership that had never failed was about to face its ultimate test against enemies who controlled the very institutions sworn to protect and serve. The Georgia forest provided little cover as dawn broke over Fort Benning's perimeter. Sarah crouched behind a fallen pine while Max conducted reconnaissance, his keen senses mapping the tactical situation with predatory precision. Through the trees, searchlights swept the base interior in systematic patterns designed to flush out fugitives. "All units, containment protocol is active." Bradley's voice crackled through intercepted radio communications. "Subjects are armed and extremely dangerous. Lethal force authorized." Max's ears flattened against his skull at the transmission. The shepherd understood enough military terminology to recognize a kill order when he heard one. Sarah's phone buzzed with another message from Bradley. "Morrison bleeds every minute you delay. His wounds aren't fatal yet." The implication was clear. Bradley was torturing the general to force her surrender. Morrison's misplaced loyalty to his mentor had delivered him into the hands of the man who'd spent years orchestrating his destruction. Max's low growl drew her attention to movement within the base. Tactical teams were deploying in hunter-killer formations, using night vision and thermal imaging to track their heat signatures. Professional soldiers conducting a military operation against 2 civilians. "We need to get back inside," Sarah whispered to Max. "Morrison's in there somewhere." The shepherd's amber eyes met hers, with shared understanding. Their mission had evolved from investigation to rescue, but the base was now a fortress designed to contain them permanently. Max led them along the perimeter fence, his nose detecting weak points in the security coverage. The shepherd's tactical training identified a maintenance gate near the motor pool, lightly guarded and partially concealed by equipment storage. Sarah picked the lock while Max maintained watch, his acute hearing monitoring guard rotations and radio chatter. The shepherd's positioning indicated one sentry approximately 50 meters away, distracted by communication with his command post. They slipped through the gate as a convoy of military vehicles rumbled past, their headlights cutting through pre-dawn darkness. Max immediately guided them toward drainage culverts that would provide concealed movement routes across the base. "Thermal contact, grid reference 247, a voice reported through radio static. "Moving toward Central Command." Sarah realized they were being tracked despite their precautions. Bradley's resources included sophisticated surveillance technology that could detect body heat through concrete and steel. Max's sudden sprint forced her to abandon stealth for speed. The shepherd had detected immediate danger. Multiple tactical teams converging on their position with coordinated precision. His powerful legs carried him across open ground faster than Sarah could follow. Automatic weapons fire erupted behind them as they dove into a concrete drainage tunnel. Bullets sparked off steel and concrete while Max led them deeper into the base's underground infrastructure. "Contact lost, grid 247, the radio reported. "Subjects in tunnel system." Bradley's response was immediate. "Flood the tunnels, drive them to surface." Water began pouring into the drainage system from multiple sources. Sarah realized Bradley was using the base's fire suppression infrastructure to force them into the open where his soldiers waited. Max pressed forward against the rising current, his powerful swimming strokes keeping them both afloat as they searched for higher ground. The shepherd's determination never wavered despite the impossible circumstances. They emerged from a storm drain near the base hospital, soaked and exhausted but alive. Max shook off the water and immediately began checking for threats, his professional training overriding physical discomfort. Sarah's phone showed a new message with an attached video file. Morrison appeared on screen, bloodied but conscious, tied to a chair in what looked like a basement or underground facility. "Sarah," Morrison's voice was weak but clear. "Don't come for me. Bradley's using me as bait. Save yourself and expose the truth." The video ended with Bradley's voice off camera. "You have 30 minutes to surrender at the ceremony platform. Come alone or watch him die slowly." Max's protective instincts fully engaged as he sensed Sarah's emotional turmoil. The shepherd pressed against her leg, offering comfort while maintaining tactical awareness of their surroundings. "He's right, boy," Sarah murmured. "It's obviously a trap." But Max's response surprised her. The shepherd moved toward the ceremony grounds with purposeful determination, his body language indicating a plan forming in his highly intelligent mind. Sarah followed, trusting 6 years of partnership over tactical logic. Max had never led her into an unwinnable situation, and his confidence suggested possibilities she couldn't see. They approached the parade ground where yesterday's bomb had been discovered. The platform stood empty under harsh security lighting, while tactical teams maintained overwatch positions from surrounding buildings. Max's behavior became increasingly focused as they neared the spot where he'd first detected explosive residue. The shepherd's nose worked frantically, processing chemical signatures that painted a complex picture of recent activities. "What is it, Max?" Sarah whispered. The dog's indication was unmistakable. More explosives, recently placed, concentrated around the platform's perimeter. Bradley hadn't just planned to use Morrison as bait. He'd prepared to eliminate all witnesses with a massive explosion that would obliterate evidence along with lives. Max's tactical intelligence had uncovered the final phase of Bradley's plan. The ceremony platform wasn't just a meeting point. It was ground zero for a blast that would destroy everyone who knew the truth about his crimes. Sarah's phone buzzed with Bradley's final message. "Time's up. Join Morrison in hell." Spotlights blazed to life across the parade ground as tactical teams emerged from concealment. But Max was already moving, his powerful frame carrying him toward the platform with suicidal courage. The shepherd had detected something in the explosive placement that Sarah couldn't understand. A weakness, a flaw, an opportunity that only his extraordinary senses could perceive. As bullets began flying and Bradley's voice echoed across loudspeakers demanding surrender, Sarah realized Max was implementing a plan that went beyond human tactical thinking. The partnership that had solved countless cases was about to attempt the impossible, defeating a military conspiracy through the courage and intelligence of one extraordinary dog. Max's intelligence had detected what human tactical analysis missed. The explosive charges around the ceremony platform were daisy-chained through a central detonator hidden beneath the stage. Sarah followed her partner's lead as he approached the device with surgical precision, his nose mapping the bomb's configuration while spotlights tracked their movement. "Collins, you have nowhere to run." Bradley's amplified voice echoed across Fort Benning's parade ground. "Surrender now, and Morrison dies quickly. Continue this pointless resistance and watch him suffer." Sarah ignored the psychological warfare, trusting Max's extraordinary senses over human threats. The shepherd had positioned himself directly over the detonator housing, his indication clear. Disable this component, and the entire explosive network would fail. "Show me, boy," she whispered. Max's precise movements guided her hands to a camouflaged access panel. Inside, Sarah found sophisticated military-grade explosive electronics connected to what appeared to be a remote detonation system. Bradley could trigger the blast from anywhere on base. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Agent Martinez isn't dead." The voice was unfamiliar, but carried federal authority. "FBI Task Force Olympus. We've been tracking Bradley's network for 2 years. Who is this?" "Special Agent Rivera. Martinez survived the bunker assault and transmitted everything before going dark. We've got Bradley's financial records, communication intercepts, and witness testimony from 17 countries." Max's sudden alertness indicated approaching hostiles. Through the shepherd's positioning, Sarah counted at least 8 tactical team members converging on their location with lethal intent. "How do I know you're legitimate?" Sarah asked, while examining the detonator's wiring. "Because Max detected the remote trigger frequency." Rivera's knowledge was too specific to be fabricated. "Bradley's using military-grade electronics with a civilian cell phone interface. Cut the red wire to disable remote detonation." Sarah's hands found the wire Rivera described. Max's calm demeanor suggested the federal agent's instructions were accurate, but cutting wrong could trigger immediate explosion. "Do it," Rivera urged. "We've got electronic warfare assets jamming Bradley's communications, but the window is closing." Sarah severed the wire as gunfire erupted around the platform. Max immediately moved to shield her body as tactical teams opened fire from multiple positions, their muzzle flashes strobing in the pre-dawn darkness. The explosion Sarah expected never came. Rivera's intelligence had been accurate. The detonator was disabled, the immediate threat neutralized. "Phase 2, Rivera's voice continued through her earpiece. "Bradley's holding Morrison in Building 12, basement level. We need you to create a distraction while federal agents move in." Max's tactical training engaged as he identified firing positions and escape routes. The shepherd's movements became fluid and purposeful, drawing enemy fire while providing Sarah with cover to advance. "Building 12, Sarah confirmed as they bounded across the parade ground under hostile fire. The administrative building housed Fort Benning's senior command structure, its basement levels containing classified briefing rooms and secure communication facilities. Perfect location for an off-the-books interrogation. Max led them through the building's service entrance, his nose detecting recent human scent trails that included Morrison's distinctive signature. The Shepherd's investigation became more focused as they descended toward the basement levels. Heat signatures confirmed, Rivera reported. Morrison's alive, 2 guards, Bradley's in the adjacent room coordinating the manhunt. Sarah's detective instincts processed the tactical situation. Bradley had positioned himself close enough to monitor Morrison's condition while maintaining command authority over the search operations. Professional paranoia from someone who'd survived decades of criminal activity. Max's indication at a security door was unmistakable. Morrison was behind that barrier, along with unknown numbers of hostile personnel. "Breach in 30 seconds, Rivera announced. "Federal tactical teams are moving." Sarah heard the distant sound of helicopters approaching Fort Benning's airspace. Bradley's conspiracy was about to face the full weight of federal law enforcement, but Morrison remained in immediate danger. Max's behavior shifted as he detected something that made his hackles rise. The Shepherd's nose worked frantically around the doorframe, processing scent signatures that triggered his deepest training protocols. "Explosives," Sarah realized. "Bradley's rigged Morrison with a bomb." Rivera's response was immediate. "Electronic countermeasures deploying. We're jamming all detonation frequencies, but manual triggers are still active." The door exploded inward as federal agents breached the basement facility. Max was already moving, his powerful frame carrying him toward Morrison's location with protective fury that overrode tactical caution. Sarah followed her partner into chaos. Morrison was indeed wired with explosives, conscious but barely mobile due to injuries that suggested hours of systematic torture. Bradley stood behind him with a manual detonator, his face carrying the calm desperation of someone whose entire world was collapsing. "Remarkable animal," Bradley said, noting Max's immediate positioning between himself and the other occupants. "Trained to protect, even when protection means certain death." Max's growl was low and menacing, his amber eyes fixed on Bradley with predatory focus. The Shepherd understood exactly who was responsible for Morrison's condition and the threat to everyone in the room. "It's over, Bradley." Sarah kept her weapon trained on the colonel while maintaining distance from the explosive device. "Federal agents have everything, the arms trafficking, the murdered witnesses, the cover-up, all of it." Bradley's smile was bitter. "Morrison still believes I saved his life in Afghanistan. Even now he doesn't understand that every heroic rescue was staged to build his dependence on me." The confession was exactly what Rivera's team needed. Bradley's narcissistic need to explain his brilliance was providing federal prosecutors with admissible evidence of premeditated conspiracy spanning decades. "You used him," Sarah said, keeping Bradley talking while federal agents positioned themselves for assault. "I created him," Bradley corrected. "The perfect soldier, the ideal patsy, the unwitting accomplice who would carry out any order if presented correctly." His grip tightened on the detonator. "But perfection demands sacrifice." Max's explosive movement came without warning. The Shepherd launched himself at Bradley with devastating precision, his powerful jaws clamping down on the colonel's wrist before the detonator could be triggered. The device clattered across concrete as federal agents swarmed the room. Bradley's screams mixed with Max's protective snarls as Sarah moved to secure Morrison, while her partner neutralized the immediate threat. "Got him." Rivera's voice carried satisfaction as Bradley was subdued and the explosive device rendered safe. Max returned to Sarah's side, blood on his muzzle but satisfaction in his amber eyes. The Shepherd had done what 6 years of training had prepared him for: protect innocent life, regardless of personal cost. Morrison's injuries were serious but survivable. More importantly, his faith in Bradley was finally shattered by the colonel's own confession of manipulation and betrayal. The partnership that had never failed had just taken down a conspiracy that reached from Afghanistan battlefields to the highest levels of military command. Max's extraordinary courage had saved not just Morrison's life, but exposed crimes that would have continued claiming victims for years. 2 weeks after Bradley's arrest, the Distinguished Service Cross ceremony proceeded under dramatically different circumstances. Federal agents had replaced corrupt military police, while General Morrison stood on the same platform where he'd nearly died, his injuries healing, but his spirit transformed by the truth about his mentor's betrayal. Sarah positioned herself near the platform's edge, with Max at her side, both partners maintaining professional alertness despite the heavy federal security presence. The shepherd wore a special ceremonial harness, recognizing his role in exposing the conspiracy, but his dark eyes remained focused on potential threats. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Secretary of Defense announced to the assembled crowd, "today we honor not just individual heroism, but the courage to seek truth in the face of institutional deception." The ceremony had evolved beyond Morrison's vindication into a public acknowledgement of military corruption and the federal investigation that had exposed decades of covered-up crimes. Media crews from major networks documented every moment as justice finally emerged from years of shadows. General Morrison approached the podium where Max had first detected explosive devices, his voice carrying hard-earned wisdom as he addressed the crowd. "2 weeks ago, I believed my greatest enemy was public opinion. Today, I understand my greatest enemy wore the uniform of friendship." Max's ears perked at Morrison's voice, the shepherd's intelligent eyes tracking the general's movements with protective attention. The bond between the dog and the officer had strengthened through shared trauma and mutual respect. "Colonel Bradley exploited my loyalty and manipulated my conscience," Morrison continued. "He turned my desire to serve into a weapon against innocent people, then positioned me to absorb blame for his crimes." His voice strengthened with each word. But truth has a way of surfacing, especially when guided by extraordinary courage. Morrison's eyes found Sarah and Max in the crowd. Officer Collins and her partner Max demonstrated that real heroism comes from questioning authority when authority is corrupt, from trusting instincts over institutions, and from risking everything to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The Secretary of Defense stepped forward with Morrison's long-delayed Distinguished Service Cross, but the general raised his hand in gentle refusal. "With respect, sir, I cannot accept this honor while soldiers under Bradley's command remain imprisoned for crimes they were ordered to commit," Morrison said. "Justice incomplete is justice denied." Sarah felt pride swell in her chest as Max's tail moved in rare approval. The general had finally found the moral courage that Bradley had spent years suppressing through manipulation and false brotherhood. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "I request that Officer Collins and K9 Max receive full military honors for their service to this investigation. Their partnership exemplifies the values our military should embody: loyalty to truth over politics, courage over convenience, and protection of innocent life above all else." Max's sudden alertness drew Sarah's attention to movement in the crowd. Captain Hayes, supposedly under federal custody, had appeared near the viewing stands with something metallic glinting in his hand. Sarah's training kicked in as she recognized the object, a military detonator connected to what appeared to be a suicide vest beneath Hayes's civilian jacket. Bradley's conspiracy had included contingency plans for exactly this scenario. "Gun!" Sarah shouted, drawing her weapon as Hayes raised the detonator toward the platform. Max was already moving before Sarah's warning finished echoing across the parade ground. The shepherd's powerful legs carried him through the crowd with devastating precision, his trajectory calculated to intercept Hayes before the device could be triggered. Chaos erupted as federal agents responded to the threat, but Max reached Hayes first. The shepherd's attack was perfectly executed, jaws clamping down on Hayes's wrist, forcing him to drop the detonator while driving him to the ground with overwhelming force. Explosive device neutralized, Federal tactical teams confirmed as they swarmed Hayes's position. Subject in custody. Sarah reached her partner as Max maintained control over Hayes, the shepherd's professional training, keeping the suspect immobilized until federal agents could secure him properly. Outstanding work! Special Agent Rivera appeared beside them, his expression carrying genuine admiration. Hayes was Bradley's final insurance policy. Without Max's intervention, dozens would have died. Morrison approached them as the crowd began to disperse, his face reflecting amazement at Max's continued heroism. That dog saved more lives today than most soldiers save in entire careers. Max accepted Morrison's praise with dignified calm, his amber eyes already scanning for additional threats. The shepherd's protective instincts remained fully engaged, despite the successful resolution of immediate danger. The conspiracy's finished, Rivera informed them. Hayes was the last active cell member. Bradley's network included 17 officers across 6 military installations, plus civilian contractors in 12 countries, all under federal indictment. Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders as the scope of their success became clear. What had started as routine security for a medal ceremony had exposed international criminal enterprise spanning decades. "What happens to Morrison now?" she asked. "Full vindication, complete restoration of reputation, and probably promotion to Pentagon assignment," Rivera smiled. "Plus a formal apology from the Secretary of Defense for the military's failure to protect him from Bradley's manipulation." Morrison rejoined them, carrying the Distinguished Service Cross he'd refused to accept. "Officer Collins, this belongs to you and Max. Without your courage and partnership, Bradley would still be destroying lives while wearing the uniform of honor." Sarah looked down at Max, whose intelligent eyes met hers with perfect understanding. They'd achieved something beyond solving a case or preventing deaths. They'd restored faith in the possibility that truth could triumph over institutional corruption. "We just did our job, General," Sarah replied. But Max's satisfied expression suggested he understood they'd accomplished something far more significant. The partnership that had never failed Atlanta's citizens had just proven that dedication to justice could overcome any conspiracy, no matter how powerful or well-protected. The ceremony concluded with federal agents escorting the last conspirators away, while Max received recognition from grateful military officers who finally understood the difference between blind loyalty and principled service. As they walked away from the platform where it all began, Sarah realized their partnership had evolved into something legendary, proof that courage and intelligence, properly combined, could defeat any enemy regardless of the odds. 3 months later, Sarah stood in a federal courthouse in Atlanta, watching Colonel Marcus Bradley receive his sentence. The military tribunal had found him guilty on 47 counts, including conspiracy, arms trafficking, murder, and treason. Max lay beside her chair, his presence a calming force as justice finally reached the man who had destroyed so many lives. "The defendant will serve life imprisonment without possibility of parole," the judge announced. "Additionally, all assets connected to criminal enterprise will be forfeited to compensate victims' families." Bradley's face remained impassive as federal marshals led him away, but Sarah caught the moment his eyes found hers across the courtroom. No longer the confident colonel who had manipulated Morrison and orchestrated decades of crime, Bradley looked like what he truly was, a broken old man whose empire of deception had finally collapsed. Max's calm breathing beside her chair reminded Sarah of how far they'd traveled from that first briefing at Fort Benning. The shepherd had aged in the past months, the stress of their investigation leaving subtle marks on his magnificent frame, but his intelligence remained as sharp as ever. "All rise for General Morrison," the bailiff announced. Morrison entered wearing his dress uniform, now bearing the Distinguished Service Cross he'd finally accepted after all Bradley's victims received justice. His testimony had been crucial in securing convictions for the entire conspiracy network. "Officer Collins," Morrison approached them as the courtroom emptied, "I wanted to personally thank you one final time." Sarah stood, her hand automatically moving to Max's head. "We were just doing our job, General." "No, you did far more than your job. You restored my faith in the possibility that good people can triumph over institutional corruption." Morrison knelt beside Max, his weathered hands gentle as he scratched behind the shepherd's ears. "And you, soldier, proved that heroism comes in many forms." Max's tail wagged once, a rare display of emotion from the professional working dog, but Morrison had earned that respect through shared struggle and mutual sacrifice. "What's next for you?" Sarah asked. "Pentagon assignment, heading a task force to prevent future Bradley situations. Institutional reform, better oversight, protection for whistleblowers." Morrison's expression carried hard-earned wisdom. "Making sure no other young officers get manipulated the way I was." Special Agent Rivera joined them, carrying a thick file folder. Final tally on Bradley's network: 37 convicted, including Hayes and 15 other officers. $17 million in stolen weapons and equipment recovered. Most importantly, 43 soldiers wrongfully imprisoned have been exonerated and released. Sarah felt deep satisfaction at those numbers. Max's extraordinary senses had initiated a chain reaction that exposed one of the largest military corruption scandals in American history. "There's something else," Rivera continued. "The director wants to offer you both positions with our K-9 unit. Federal salary, national jurisdiction, resources to take on cases like this across the country." Sarah looked down at Max, whose amber eyes met hers with perfect understanding. They'd spent 6 years serving Atlanta's citizens, building a reputation for solving impossible cases through their unbreakable partnership. "Thank you, but Atlanta is our home," Sarah replied. "Our work there isn't finished." Rivera nodded with respect. "I figured you'd say that, but the offer stands permanently. Law enforcement needs partnerships like yours." As they walked from the courthouse into Atlanta's afternoon sunshine, Sarah reflected on the case that had tested their bond beyond anything they'd previously experienced. Max had saved dozens of lives, exposed international criminal conspiracy, and proven that intuition combined with courage could overcome any enemy. "What do you think, boy?" she asked as they reached their patrol car. "Ready to get back to regular police work?" Max's response was immediate, a purposeful walk toward their vehicle, his professional demeanor indicating readiness for whatever challenges awaited them. The shepherd had never been motivated by glory or recognition, only by the drive to protect innocent people and serve alongside his trusted partner. Sarah's radio crackled with their first assignment since returning to duty. "All units, we have a robbery in progress at First National Bank, suspects armed and dangerous." "Unit 12 responding," Sarah replied, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with active duty. Max was already in the passenger seat, his tactical harness secure and his dark eyes focused on the road ahead. The partnership that had exposed military corruption and international conspiracy was returning to the streets of Atlanta, ready to face whatever crimes threatened their city. As they raced through traffic with sirens wailing, Sarah realized their experience at Fort Benning had fundamentally changed them. They'd learned that corruption could hide within respected institutions, that heroes and villains weren't always easily identified, and that sometimes the greatest courage required questioning authority itself. But most importantly, they'd proven that their partnership was unbreakable. 6 years of trust, training, and mutual sacrifice had created something that could survive any test, overcome any enemy, and achieve justice regardless of the odds. Max's calm presence beside her as they approached the bank robbery reminded Sarah why she'd chosen law enforcement. Not for glory or recognition, but for moments like this, racing toward danger to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The partnership that had never failed was ready for whatever challenges awaited them. In Atlanta's streets or military bases, against street criminals or international conspirators, Sarah and Max would continue their mission of serving justice and protecting innocent lives. Their legend was just beginning. As they pulled up to the bank, Max's alert posture indicated he'd already begun processing the tactical situation. The shepherd's extraordinary senses were engaged, his protective instincts fully activated, his partnership with Sarah operating at the peak of their capabilities. Together, they moved toward the bank entrance, ready to add another chapter to their story of courage, loyalty, and uncompromising dedication to justice. The partnership that had exposed a conspiracy spanning decades was about to tackle their next case, proving once again that no criminal enterprise could withstand the combined intelligence, courage, and determination of one exceptional woman and her extraordinary dog.